Thank John. It's been great to really learn a lot of insight and sharing. And congratulations to Kate with the Small and Mighty team. It's done an amazing job. And really like the way that Rich had put together of how to frame AI and what AI can do in making the patterns. And so with us, when we think about, okay, great, with all the great things that AI can provide insights, but at marketers or as operators, somebody that make decision, we normally think, so what? What is the next step? What are we gonna do? So Molly and I are today to kind of share the applications of that, and one of the bubble that Rich had shown related to personalization strategy. And with that, I'll let Molly kind of share your background at IBM.
Great, thank you, Danny. So my name is Molly Reinganum. I am the group product manager of our content platform ecosystem. Now, before describing what that is, because it's very vague, I want to provide a little bit of a history of me at IBM. I joined IBM 5-ish years ago under the guise of content analytics. So how do we measure the success of content across our different channels in context of the who and where they are within their journey? And during that endeavor, I said, wait a minute. We can't even measure content because we don't know what type of content we have. There are several different organizations within IBM marketing that build their own content, that have their own measurements of KPIs, that have their own tactics for marketing their product or for marketing within their market. And so we had no really standardized governance model around how we build content, where we store content, how we publish it, how do we measure its success. So then how can I even do content analytics? And I went to various people, and over the course of a couple of years, eventually created this team called the Integrated Content Platform team, and that's the content ecosystem team. And really, the intent of that team is to bring our 26 different platforms for content creation, to storage, to management, to publishing, to reporting, all together into one standardized, integrated team to develop a really secure, innovative, what I call marketing supply chain, from content creation to publishing, to measurement, to optimization, so on and so forth. So the content platform ecosystem includes our content management systems, our digital asset management systems, our content creation workflow tools, our reporting mechanisms and data layers behind that, as well as our A/B testing and personalization tools. So it's really bringing everybody together so that we work towards the same objectives. And that is what I do.
So in other words, your job is really focusing on optimizing the usage of brand-owned content on your own platforms across different multiple devices or applications. Is that correct?
That's right. The IBM's always like, and I'm sure a lot of companies are always saying, well, we want to do personalization at scale in as automated fashion as possible. How can we even do personalization if we don't have the foundations for that? So that's really the focus on my end, is foundations, the content, and then I have a counterpart who's working on the foundations from the audience perspective.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like where our work ends is where your work begins. And hi everybody, I am the head of technology product and strategic growth for Xomad. We are a influencer research and marketing agency that turned into more of a technology company, and we've done work from activating celebrity like J-Lo, and to really focusing now these days activating massive army of nano and micro creators. We like to call them creators rather than influencer because the terms is sort of like quickly be associated with celebrity like Kendall, Kylie, Kardashians, and things like that. And for us, it's all about deploying these strategies to really still along the line of personalizations, right? But our goal is to use this massive group of content creators who has such a great trust with the target consumer that own the brands, try to reach and engage with and drive traffic, to the brand's platform. But from our own experience too, that we have seen though, even though we have such an amazing program where we double the traffic driving within, year to year, like from year to year, web traffic performance metric that indicate, and we've seen that brand unfortunately has failed to capture that traffic landing on their website. So it really speaks loudly about what you are doing at IBM. With that being said, really curious about, what are the different complexity, like challenges that you face given such an enormous endeavor that you are taking on right now, because IBM is such a global company and doing so many things.
So it's really hard because we're trying to balance the building of the foundations in parallel to the ever evolving technology and ways that people are consuming content. We're trying to stay very focused in my world on building out that foundation. Because again, you can't do personalization if you don't even know what content you have and how it resonates with others. Now, at IBM, we're a very large company across several different markets, offering several types of products, many of which aren't tangible physical items. And the ways in which we connect with our clients and our prospects are varied, whether it's through digital interactions via the web and email, whether it's in-person events that then can lead to further interactions, whether it's sales meetings, whatever it may be. There's lots of forms of engaging potential individuals and pushing them through our journey to eventual conversion, retention, and brand loyalty. And with all of that complexity, there's also a lot of complexity around the content itself. So the challenge for us is coming up with really the standardized way of building out a content library, kind of reminiscing on the opening concept of a library in the brain. I'm literally building a content brain where we have standards around what content is in there. We're building out our own Dewey Decimal System for indexing content for easy retrieval. We're building out our analytics program to better understand how content performs within the context of a journey and within expressed interests based on the consumer's patterns of interest. So the complexity is really in the standardization of it all. To then provide that input and knowing that the content itself can be delivered across different mediums and within different channels and different forms of engagement. I'll also say another area of complexity is not just building that library, but, and I touched on this already, measuring the performance of content, especially in our cookieless future. Because so much of what we historically measured content on is the who was engaging with it and looking at them based on certain attributes. And now we're having to get more into the why and into the, well, what are they expressing from an interest perspective? What are their behaviors telling us? So on and so forth, to help us identify what types of content resonate most with the particular consumer. So that's kind of my main objective. Again, build that content library, have it adopted across our marketing and sales organization, and ensure that in a future state, it's as streamlined and standardized as possible for finding content and in the future automatically publishing across our different channels and evolving it. I'll also add one more thing, which is in order to personalize content, you have to have different variations of it. And that those variations can be, based on industry or job role, but it can also get to the granularity of the individual itself. So, as we're building this content library, it's not just around process, standardization, governance, syndication strategies, and performance strategies. It's also around, well, how do we even create variations in a manageable fashion? Because we could end up having, 500 variations of one item based on its targeted audience, based on the channel it's in, based on if it's digital or corporal, whatever it may be. So that's another area that we're really diving into.
Great. So with that being said, can you share a little bit about how AI or perhaps the capability that IBM Watson's has? How's that going to help kind of solving the challenges, the complexity that you are working on?
Sure. So again, IBM is a very big company. We have several different markets. We have over 250,000 employees. We have a whole slew of products, hundreds of products. And we have a lot of content, literally well over 1 million types of content across our organization. No way in heck can an individual manage all of that alone. We can't have people building content, uploading it somewhere, tagging it somewhere, tying in the KPIs to it. It's just not scalable. It's just not possible. So as we're building out these processes, and as we're building out this model of the content library, we're also identifying areas in the future for automating some of these processes. So we have our own natural language process algorithms that will assist with the classification of content. We have our own kind of machine learning processes to tie performance data to our content so we know what type of content resonates well. And of course, taking a step back, big picture, I'm just one pillar, right? I'm the content side. There's also the audience side. So the two of us in our respective pillars are working towards developing our personalization brain. And that's where, really a lot of the AI work comes together, because we'll have the foundations in content and we'll have the foundations on the audience side.
Great. Thanks for sharing all of that. It's definitely, one of the points that you touch on in terms of performance metrics, which is everybody love to hear here. And for us, it's, one thing that we have seen so far from the brand side, and for you also to kind of looking at content based on like pieces, like individual pieces, but not really looking at it as more of a collective, like how the content flow through one end to the other. Don't you agree? Sort of like that, sort of the challenge. In our own world, we've seen that it's the same thing when brand looking at a influencer strategy. They always just think, is this pieces of post, how many impressions they got, what is the engagement, is that, and that's it. Or sometimes they're getting into more on the sentiment of the type of the comment that's there. But then they they sort of overlook the fact that actually when you look at things, you need to look at it as a holistic. It's like how the consumer going through a journey, right? And us, if you think about it, when we're making the decision on purchasing anything or consider to do something, the people that really influence us are the people within our network, the people that we know, right? I would not purchase a skincare product just because Kylie used it. I probably turn and say, oh, okay, great, good for you. But if my friends or the people who I follow on social media has known to me that she tries different things all the time, and she talked great about this philosophy, skincare product, for example, or this Olay retinol, or something like that, if she say it, I'm gonna start pay attention. But she doesn't have millions of followers, right? She's only have maybe 5,000, or if less than 10,000. And then I have another friend who wants to talk about the product. Now, when 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people to talk about that, then I start to make that decision, right? When you do your performance measurement on platform and branded, brand-owned content, did you see the same kind of, behavior in terms of performance metric that you see across the integrated, consumer journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think there's a lot of challenges behind that question too. So certainly the journey can be fragmented, and there's different ways of engaging, whether it's via our website or a sales meeting or an event or whatever it may be. There are different types of interactions that we have. But I would say the other major complexity for us is we're a B2B company. We're not a B2C company. So the types of interactions we're getting by individuals, and we're trying to process their contextual clues, their interests, really getting to the motive of the why, but it's really hard to identify the motive of the why when you have 5 different individuals engaging with us all for the same business, each with their own motives. So how do we identify the why within a B2B framework is a challenge. So it's fragmented in a lot of different ways, because there's a lot of different types of engagement throughout the prospecting, conversion, and retention process. But IBM is also engaging with a lot of different people. And a lot of those people, might not even be the decision makers at the end of the day. So it's a balance between kind of identifying all those touch points and putting together standard KPIs around that. It's a balance, certainly for my audience counterpart, on taking the different forms of engagement with our content and identifying profiles around a business as opposed to an individual. And I can't say we have a solution yet. We're still very much experimenting and working towards this dream state of having a solution. But it's certainly something that's at top of mind consistently as we're continuing to develop the foundations required for our personalization at scale strategy.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, it's an ongoing process, right? It's something that it's a long journey. And in fact, I just recently have conversations with one of the AI expert. Work for XPRIZE organizations, and they've done a lot of program on innovations, and they actually said one of the things is where, like in the agency world, like we kind of apply various different AI on trying to come up with the best capability to serve our client, whether it is to find the best group of content creators who can enable our brand client to really engage with the target audience by multiple content creator as part of the campaign, so that we can really drive actions. And even especially we've seen like very great return, like ROI for when it comes to public health. Like we actually also start seeing the pandemic, we start working with public health department across the nations, and we've seen the vaccination rate correlate very, very closely to whenever 100 of content creator posting within a short period of time. Like for all these sort of looking at these ability of how to identify, like building capability further to really accelerate and put steroid on this kind of engine to really deliver the final ROI. One of those things is that agency had been doing it themselves, using third-party data most of the time. But there's so much power when the first party and the third party, so the agency and the brand coming together and collaborate. Because what AI can do is over time, as it learns, consumer, like the first data as well as third-party data and things that we do from the agency world, to really even identify new type of performance measurement. beyond than just a simple number, right? Because that you see on one of Rich example, it's all these pieces, the pattern that coming together that give us the answer that we overlooked, right? I think that's one of the wish per se, right? Would to be able to kind of bring these two parties together to work closely. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge endeavor to really, especially in this day and age, as things are constantly evolving, come up with a personalized journey. And we try, and we are doing as much in-house as possible, right? We have our own creative agency. We are, working with our existing technologies to develop our, abilities for AI within our personalization landscape. But we certainly can't do it alone. So, and we're certainly coming into it with our own perspective, right? We define our own marketing strategy, we define our own targeted audience, we define our own KPIs, we build our own content, and we're building our own personalization engine. But again, we can't do it alone, and it's important to get that unique perspective on things that we don't have. And there's also only so much that we can do. So to really be successful, there is a level of partnership, and we do work with different agencies across the strategy perspective, the creative perspective, the media perspective, and with collaboration with those agencies, we then are able to come up with a comprehensive model.
Great, thank you. And I think it's about time to open the floor for any questions from the audience. Cameras don't pick you up if you're not mic'd.
So thank you both for coming and speaking. And Molly, just a point of clarity. It sounds like your responsibility is aggregating content across the organization that runs on your owned channels. So I guess one, did I hear that right? And two, how do you activate all of this content in your paid channels? And how do you decide which particular piece of content that will run in like a typical advertising format, like the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times? I guess, how do the different brand managers get access to this ginormous library of content?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yes, you got it right. So my main objective is to create the aggregated model of content across the organization. And that content is intended to be used both within our own channels, but also within the paid landscape, whether it's an ad in a online periodical or a television ad, whatever it may be. The key to that decision of where and when and how can we use content within those channels is really based on the analytics element, as well as the brand messaging behind that content itself. So it's twofold. One is we work very closely with our brand organization to ensure that everything within the library, specifically designed for paid media tactics, aligns with a certain structure of messaging and design and voice and things along those lines, and having the right metadata around that so the brand team can easily access all of that information within the library. The other element is, again, the analytics, and that's the hard part, especially when you have paid media across, television, digital forms of engagement, events. It's hard to create a comprehensive view around certain pieces of content, knowing that there's different forms of engagement. So what we're doing is we're working with our brand organization, we're working with our paid media organization to gain as much information around performance as possible to then ingest back into our content system. So as a brand manager is looking at what is available within the library, they can also see what performs best within a certain channel what doesn't perform at all, and what does perform okay, but could be optimized through another creative life cycle.
Hey Molly, it sounds like you have your hands full on a day-to-day basis. I have a follow-up on that question actually, and it's from the standpoint of pumping out new content on a day-to-day basis, how are you identifying the quality and the success of the individual content that resonates with the audiences for each of the products that you have? Because I think you had mentioned you have hundreds of thousands of pieces of content, but particularly in the B2B space, I think it can be hard to identify what's successful and what's not. So I'm curious what types of systems you're using to identify what succeeds and what potentially fails.
Good question. So I would say, when I joined IBM a couple years ago, they were pumping out so much content, and content marketers measured themselves based on how much content they were building. And there was kind of a point of intervention where we said, well, it's not necessarily about the quantity of the content, it's about the quality of the content. So that the way that we're even incentivizing building content is more around don't build more content. Go out there, see what we have that exists today that you couldn't find in the past when we had all these decentralized systems. See what exists today, identify how they're performing, and see if you can reuse or optimize the existing content to meet your objectives. So that doesn't really answer your question, but I just wanted to get that out there. We've transitioned kind of ideologies from build to make less matter more. Now, in regards to measurement tied to strategies within the digital space or tied to product, it's a tremendous challenge, again, because there's a lot of different channels in which you can engage with content and a lot of different forms of engagement as a result of those channels. I would say another challenge is we have to ensure that the KPIs we associate with content are also easy to understand and can resonate with anybody. So the way that we're doing this is we're leveraging a series of different tools to collect performance metrics of content. And then kind of aggregating all of that information, standardizing it within a singular view, and creating what we're calling the content scoring model, which will basically say, hey, here's the overall score of content. And then kind of if you dive into it, you can get the granularities of how it performs within a channel, how it performs within the context of, say, a web page, whatever it may be. The types of tools are all over the spectrum. So we have our web performance tools. We use Google Analytics to capture web traffic data. For a lot of our paid tactics, we work with agencies that leverage their own performance measurement tools that we then import into our data warehouse. We've built our own multi-touch attribution model as well that, again, we import. We of course, leverage sales data as well, and our marketing conversion data as well. So basically, we have a combination of web traffic, attribution data, paid media data, conversion data, client retention data, that we all bring together into this one warehouse. We do some massaging to it, and then eventually pop out a content score for folks to look at.